I did my vision board of the crazy things that will probably never come true. And I wrote down two things. One was getting backing from Google.
We've just been backed by Google.
And the other one was going on Dragon's Den.
I will offer you half the money.
I'm going to offer you all of the money.
And I'm going to offer you all of the money.
I would offer you all of the money.
Everything good has happened in our lives because we've taken a leap of faith and we've taken a big risk. Locked ourselves in a hotel room for 2 days. Must have rehearsed our pitch 300 times. The one thing I will not be is not excellent when I go in the room. Most ideas are not exceptional. The thing that makes you brilliant is the execution. I don't know whether I should say this on a podcast. I put my life savings into the business, got rejected 200 times by investors, tried things and failed. It was a disaster.
Wow.
0 to 1 is by far the hardest piece of the journey. I can do that for 3 months and then I completely crash and burn. It's taken me a long time to get to this point. I really am the sum of the 5 people that I am around the most. You can be very deliberate of the people that you surround yourself with, designing your life deliberately so you can achieve those things. See so many entrepreneurs, they're like magpies, ego over profit. This is about staying the course, it's about focus, be the best at that one thing, and that got us to £1 million. Barriers to entry for entrepreneurship are lower than they have ever been. Fastest growing group of new entrepreneurs in the UK is black and brown women, but they are the least group that are able to scale. Post George Floyd, DE&I was a trend, and it is now no longer hot. I meet great black and brown entrepreneurs all the time, is try and make my business as big as possible, make as much money as I possibly can, and reinvest that money into the ecosystem. Ultimately, people scale businesses because they have access to the cash to do so. We are the first generation of people who are on this journey.
Yeah.
Let's see how far we get.
Lottie Whyte is the co-founder and CEO of MyoMaster, one of the UK's fastest growing wellness brands that specialises in recovery tech products, including compression boots, massage guns, at-home sauna pods, and ice plungers. Lottie, welcome to Strategy and Tragedy. Amazing to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited. I feel like it's been a long time coming.
It's been a long time coming, but everything in good timing.
Exactly.
We have to kick off the conversation with Dragon's Den, of course. So, dubbed the Dragon Slayer. I love that nickname.
Yeah, I'll take it for sure.
Take it. So, obviously, there was that viral clip of you clapping back at Stephen Bartlett.
These massage guns, they send me this stuff all the time. And it's just piling up in my house.
With all due respect, you're not our core customer, to be honest with you. Like, our core customer isn't getting sent free Therabodies. They're people who love sport, but they're not, though. They love running, they go to park run, they sign up for 10K runs. We meet thousands and thousands of them.
But I actually watched the full pitch, and I actually thought Tuka Sullivan was the bigger get.
Let's get back to reality. At the end of the day, what you haven't said, you'll get your money back in X time, and you'll get X times your investment in X period, and that's why we're investable.
I'm glad you said all of those things because we prepared for those questions.
Why are you glad? That's reality.
We're ready, and you wanted to see how credible we are.
Yeah.
So I'm about to show you.
Well, show me.
So our forecast is that in 7 years' time...
How much?
In
7 years' time?
You've got to wait 7 years
6.
to...
Oh, my God. 7 years' time.
Can I finish? Is that okay?
Okay, sorry. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah.
I thought you handled that brilliantly.
Yeah.
We see a 10-minute cut down of what I know takes hours and hours. So I'd love for you to give us a bit of a taste of behind the scenes, the reality. How long did it actually take? Were you nervous? Let's kick off from there.
Yeah, so we, it was really kind of, I guess, serendipitous experience because I write my vision board at the start of every year. You know, I'm a true millennial. And at the start of 2024, I wrote down, I did my vision board as I always would, which for me is like the crazy things that will probably never come true, but that, like, you know, in the wildest world might. And I wrote down 2 things. One was getting backing from Google, and the other one was going on Dragon's Den.
Wow.
And I then, in like, I don't know, April of last year, we got investment from Google, one of 10 companies in the world that they invested in as startups. And then in like May, I got a call from the producers of Dragon's Den, and I'd forgotten to fill out the form. I just got busy with everything.
Wow.
And they got in touch and said, you know, we've been watching your journey online and we think you'd be a great fit for the show. And even though I had written it down and I'd sort of manifested it, I guess, I was really reluctant when they actually came through because the due diligence is insane. Like, I've pitched a lot of investors, a lot, and I've never had to go through a due diligence process like that. And, you know, secondly, when the opportunity's, you know, on your lap, you start to think of all the things that can go wrong and how exposing it is. And you have to put all your numbers out there and everything. And so I did take a big period of consideration, and we actually only fully decided to do it about 4 days before we filmed.
Oh.
Yeah, and it
Fun
was
fact.
in like a super busy period. My son had chicken pox. I was at trade shows all weekend, like selling on the floor, like, which are really like exhausting, tiring things. And then we were like, look, you know, everything, my husband and I and co-founder and I were like, look, everything good has happened in our lives because we've taken a leap of faith and we've taken a big risk. So why is this any different? And so we went up to Manchester, where they film it at the BBC Studios, locked ourselves in a hotel room for 2 days, and just like I've seen every episode of Dragon's Den. I don't actually normally watch the show, but I just wrote down every question anyone had ever been asked, and I prepared an answer. And we must have rehearsed our pitch 300 times. Like, the one thing we weren't going to do, or I wasn't going to let us fail on, was being unprepared. And I think you see a lot of people go in there like that, where maybe they really prepare for the 2-minute pitch, but they don't spend enough time really thinking about what they're going to get asked. And if you spend enough time looking back at the episodes, you realize there's a pattern. Like, you know, there's only so many questions you're going to get confronted with. And also to really know the weaknesses in your business. I knew we were going to get talked about market saturation, and there's a lot of other people out there who do this and all of that kind of stuff. So really prepared for those. I've pitched, like I said, a lot of investors. So for me, I don't think I was that nervous because it's another pitch. And I also think the thing that you develop the more you pitch is that you develop this kind of deep understanding that you believe in what you're doing. And that belief is unshakable, despite what anybody else's opinions are. And the fundamental bottom line is they're just five people, right? So yeah.
That is so exciting. All right, so I've got a few thoughts I want to dive into. So one is, I'm hot off a few other recent interviews where they talk about the importance of thinking big. I know it sounds like such a cliche, but the whole kind of BHAGs, like big, hairy, audacious goals. And what I'm linking here with your story is how you clearly have that risk tolerance, you're taking that leap of faith, and by raising the bar, you kind of create that situation where there's enough pressure to force you to be like, we cannot fail, and to force you into that situation of, I love what you said before with Senior Sale Online, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, right? And just kind of, we are not going to let this fail. So super exciting. Another coincidence I just want to touch on is you are now the 5th entrepreneur that I've interviewed who has been on Dragon's Den. And it just so happens that the other 4 are all women. Now, I don't know if that is just a coincidence from my side. Obviously, I haven't interviewed all the entrepreneurs in the UK, but the subset that I've had on the show, am I reading too much into that, or do you think there's something there?
I think actually, to your first point about risk, I think I think that is the ultimate thing, right? And I think opportunities come, and the key thing is to be insanely prepared. Like, the one thing I will not be is not excellent when I get in the room. Like, you can not like me, you can not like my idea, but no one will walk out saying I wasn't brilliant. You know, that's the expectation I set on myself. And I think when you have that standard of yourself, you can always walk away knowing in a good place. You know? Because you can't control other people's opinions. Yeah. The second thing about females, I don't know about the show. I think it's probably fairly balanced, but I do think that increasingly, as women have more economic power, as we have also, there's kind of a dichotomy, which is one, we have more economic power, but also it is getting harder, I think, to be a woman in the corporate workplace, have a family, juggle the different facets of your life. And so I think that is driving more people into entrepreneurship. Plus, the barriers to entry for entrepreneurship are lower than they have ever been. There's more education out there. You can start brands for cheaper than you ever have been able to. So I think the data actually says that more women are getting into entrepreneurship. I know the fastest growing group of new entrepreneurs in the UK is Black and brown women.
Amazing.
But they are the least group that are able to scale.
Yeah, annoying. But it's changing. I think it is going in the right direction. Not sure.
I don't think it is.
You don't think so?
Not for ethnically diverse women. I don't think it's changing.
What do you think that's down to?
A lot of different things. Firstly, it's down to community, it's down to networks. So much of the businesses that are able to scale do so because they have had access to people that have been able to help them to do that. And if you don't come from a place where you have that kind of network, it is exceptionally difficult. I've seen most ideas are not exceptional. You know, most businesses are, idea is not exceptional. The thing that makes you brilliant is the execution. And what is so tied up in the execution is access to cash, it's access to the right people, it's access to knowledge. And if you come from a place where you just are not, no entrepreneurs, you're not even aware of the networks that exist, you aren't able to access cash. I was speaking to somebody yesterday who's trying to create or has created an MBA for Black founders, an accessible MBA for Black founders, an incredible program called MBA 30. And he was saying that even if you go for a bank loan as an entrepreneur, the key factor that they put in their algorithm is your postcode. So if your postcode is, for instance, Brixton, you are so much less likely to get a bank loan for your business than if you lived in the home counties, for example. So there's a lot of factors that in our society just make it incredibly difficult. And I meet great Black and brown entrepreneurs all the time who have ideas that are equally as good as all of the other founders that I meet, but they have no idea how to get started. They have nobody in their life they've ever met who's an entrepreneur. They have no access that they can tap into. They often don't have access to capital. So I think that's the reason. And
I think you're right with the current state of play, but in terms of the direction that it's going, I am aware of different communities, networks. You just mentioned this amazing MBA 30 program, which sounds great. There are things, initiatives, whatever you want to call them, that's
we're sitting here at the end of January. I don't want to time this too much because I don't know where it's going to go. But, you know, Donald Trump has just got into power. Mark Zuckerberg has just announced he's dropping every DE&I initiative. And it feels very much to me and to a lot of people that I know that look like me that you know, post George Floyd, DE&I was a trend, and it is now no longer hot. And so therefore we made a little bit of progress, and we are now very much going backwards. And I think the way I look at it from a personal perspective is all I can do is try and make my business as big as possible, make as much money as I possibly can, and reinvest that money into the ecosystem. Because the problem as well is there are a lot of programs, and that is helpful to a degree, but what people really need is money. Ultimately, people scale businesses because they have access to the cash to do so. That's the fundamental truth. And if you don't have access to cash, you can't scale your business most of the time, or it's just incredibly difficult.
I love that.
So yeah.
No, it makes complete sense, and it's very logical. This is also the argument for supporting outliers like yourself to go and make that money, have that impact beyond the buzzwords, like actually make that cash, because you're so much more likely to reinvest that in the ecosystem, as you say. So all the more reason that you need to become
and the thing is, for me, looking up, you know, as I started a business in my early 30s, right, looking up around me, like who are the people that have done, who are 10 years further along than me? They're not there. They don't exist. Like, try and find a Black and brown founder, especially a female, who has built a consumer product business to 100 million quid. Emma Greedy, but she's in LA, she's in America. It was fucking amazing. But like, one of really. There's no one there. You can't see there's no role models. We are the first generation of people who are on this journey. Let's see how far we get. But.
So what makes you such an outlier with this then? Like, obviously you've got such unparalleled tenacity, determination. You mentioned before that you hold yourself to such a high standard. And you've said also that you've met these amazing people from these communities that also have this potential and these amazing ideas. What's made you different? What's helped you get to where you are now? Yeah,
I think I was writing a post about this actually last night as I was like prepping some content, and I was thinking about what really sets people apart. And I think for me, I was really lucky that I have two parents who are not well connected, do not have cash. I couldn't have started my business out of a spare bedroom in my 20s, but I have two parents who just have insane belief in what I'm capable of. Amazing. They really think that, like, my dad, when I was 12, used to be like, if you want to be the Prime Minister, like, you could totally do it.
Love
like,
that.
Legit, that's his energy.
Love that.
And so he was just constantly championing me, and also gave me, I guess non-cash based things, in the sense that, like, when I've had my child, they've taken care of my son, or they've given me free childcare. Like all of these things that have given me the ability to really scale my business. Like if I didn't have someone to help me with childcare, I wouldn't have been able to scale my business, things like that. But really it comes down to this, like they had belief in me. And they've always consistently in my life, and I was speaking to my dad about this the other day, put me deliberately in environments where I did not belong. And that's been difficult, very, very difficult for me, but it has also allowed me to now be comfortable in environments where I don't belong. So at 23, I joined a firm in the city, was the only, person of colour in the whole business, felt extremely, extremely, extremely uncomfortable. But I was so used to that feeling because I'd just constantly been in those situations. And I could hold my own amongst all the white, posh people who skied and who talked about this. I could talk about those things with them. And that is what has allowed me to be. And sometimes when I spend time with other black and brown founders, they don't feel comfortable in those environments because they've never been in them, which is totally fine. And so it's much more difficult for them to like network and hold space in them.
And get past those internal barriers
100%.
and hurdles.
But also you have to talk their language, right? You already look different. You already are different. So you have to be able to
adapt a little
bit.
And be a bit of a
and that's a really difficult thing to do if you have no experience of doing it.
So getting comfortable with the discomfort. Shout out to Mr. and Mrs. White.
Honestly,
that's amazing.
Big up. They're insane. Like insane.
I love so much how you give kudos to, that recognition to like I'm obsessed with like headwinds and tailwinds, right? And I purposely prioritize as much diversity as I can with the guests on the show. And I'm not saying, but like definitely room for improvement, but I want to use this as a platform to get those voices across as much as possible. And I've definitely noticed that even just by default of being a female host of a business show, the pendulum doesn't need to go that far for it to become gendered. Like you can go so far in the masculine and it be kind of mainstream and accepted, but it's like a little bit feminine or a little bit brown or whatever, and then you fall into that category. So I love that we've got onto this topic as well. You mentioned, so with headwinds, tailwinds, you mentioned your upbringing, self-confidence, self-belief, your parents. You've got a co-founder as well, who's also your husband, as you mentioned. That must have, of course, been a consideration at the start, going into business with your partner. Talk us through that. Like, obviously, it's a risk.
So I met my husband when I was 23 years old. Wow. Literally left university, moved to London with my friends, and walked into the pub and met him. Like, that was literally it. And we've been together, pretty much half my life now. And that is another headwind.
Exactly.
a massive one for me. Like, very lucky with my parents and very lucky with the person I married. My husband, went to the worst state school in Nottingham. He is, has the worst eyesight of anyone you've ever seen. Broke his leg in 4 places when he was 17 and went on to become the most, I forget what the accolade is. Something like the most decorated rugby player, British rugby player.
Wow.
So it's I can't. It's not exactly that, but it's something like that. But the point is, he came from a background where he I think 95% of rugby players are from private school. He had to bash down every single door. He got rejected at every single point. He wasn't supposed to make it. People from where he comes from, that doesn't happen to them. And him and I share a value set and a set of kind of behaviours and a mindset that is very, very aligned. And so that is why that has had a huge impact, because I spend the most time of all with him, right? He's my husband. And so I guess when I look back on it and I kind of reflect on my life, I really am the sum of the 5 people that I am around the most. And I think that's true for everyone. I think obviously you can't choose your parents, but you can be very deliberate of the people that you surround yourself with. And I'm very proactive about that. I am not afraid to loosen the reins on people in my life if I just don't feel like we're accelerating at the same pace. And it sounds so harsh when you say it like that, but I'm just such a big believer that you feed off the energy of the people around you, and that they either lift you up or keep you where you are, or worse, drag you down. And in terms of starting a business with him, we're a good co-founding team because he's obsessed with product and I'm an entrepreneur. So, and I think that combination, I saw something about this the other day actually, but that combination is really special. If you have someone who's product focused and essentially the engineer, although it's not a tech business.
Sure.
And I'm the entrepreneur. I'm obsessed with building businesses, how you do it, the commercials, the marketing, all of that stuff.
Well, perfect segue. Let's dive into that. All right. So let's talk about these growth levers. So am I correct? Fact check here. 25 million turnover? If I plucked that out of thin air.
No, definitely. I wish it was not quite that, but yeah, it's good.
Are you okay? I mean,
Yeah.
you've kind of bared all on Dragon's Den. Do you want to?
Yeah, we're in a much different place now, right? Because
You're in
we
a very different
recorded that
place.
a while ago, but yeah, we're a multi-million pound company.
Multi-million pound
Yeah.
business. You've succeeded in securing, I think I read online, almost £1 million in funding.
Yeah.
Of course, you bootstrapped for a couple of years
Yeah.
as well, right? You were loss making.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the stomach for that as well,
Yeah.
because again, watching Dragon's Den, you recounting those numbers, oh my God, that feeling of making those losses, but knowing that you're on that trajectory is
Yeah.
something I'd love to hear about. But specifically with the growth levers. So I know that what got you here doesn't get you there.
Yeah.
And I know that from going from 0 to 1 is a very different thing from like 1 to
The
10,
hardest
10 to
bit.
50.
Yeah.
So can you kind of recount what kind of got you to each stage? Like what took you 0 to 1? What were the top sales, marketing channels,
Yeah,
unexpected
sure.
things that work for you?
0 to 1, I think, is by far, as in 1 million, right? Is by far the hardest piece of the journey, and I think takes the longest. And for me, that was it was excruciating. I put my life savings into the business, and when I say I had everything on the line, like I literally had everything on the line. And
How do you stomach that?
yeah, I'm just a big believer in the whole like think about how you're gonna feel when you're 80. You know, like you're not gonna be sad that even if I lost my life savings. Thankfully we've got them back now, but even if I had have done that, I also just, like I said, I have this deep belief that I'll figure out. Like I just know I will, and I know I'll be all right. So yeah, that's how I stomach that. But in terms of the growth, 0 to 1, oh my God, the pain of it. So especially as a first time entrepreneur, especially without like VC, because I think you can buy your way to £1 million quid,
exactly,
you know, at incredible loss making rates.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the journey we were taking, and every penny kind of counted. So the key things for me are, firstly, it's actually a mindset game. This is about staying the course and having belief and knowing that it will take time. I had no idea like what I was doing, literally none. And I had to learn that I think most of the time it takes longer than you think.
Yeah.
Secondly, it was about focus. So I see so many entrepreneurs that I mentor now. They're making 200 grand, 300 grand, you know, which is a great amount of money, but they want to scale their businesses. And the key thing they do is they're like magpies. Like there's another, but I see that brand over there, TikTok Live, doing TikTok. And I'm doing meta ads, and I'm trying to get into, you know, B&Q, and whatever. Like, and that's what I did, because I was like, why? You're an entrepreneur, A, by nature, so your nature is to like take the opportunities, and B, you're like any little thing to make some more money. And so I went through that cycle, lost a shit ton of money trying to do that, and pulled it all back and just said, we're going to focus on e-commerce, we're going to scale through meta ads, we're going to make great content, that's all we're going to do. And that's what we did. And that got us to £1 million.
Yeah, I love that.
So the ability to just execute on one channel and become excellent at it, you can easily get to £1 million of revenue just with one marketing channel, whether it's organic or it's TikTok or it's Meta or whatever it is, retail, whatever. But like, be the best at that one thing.
Yeah. I'm so happy you say that, just to jump in on that, because it is such a classic mistake. I see it happen all the time.
It's so hard to stop yourself.
It's so hard. And I did want to ask you about that with how you prioritize, because one of the biggest truisms in startup land is that startups don't die, they drown.
Yeah.
And there's a never ending to-do list, right? It's totally true. And I think you're saying, okay, it's part of your nature as an entrepreneur anyway, but also, at least in my personal experience, I found that going from employment into entrepreneurship myself, for the first time, it was almost like the reins were taken off and the brakes were off. It's like, right, now I can just like, the world is my oyster. I can go out there and
but
like,
there's no one holding you to account as well. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
You're just like free to just make your own decisions. There's no one sitting there going, hang on a sec.
Stay the course. So on that as well, before we move on to those next stages, how did you prioritize? So like the benefit, as much as we're like, oh, these scatterbrain knee-jerking entrepreneurs are like here, there and everywhere, the benefit of that is that you do get to experiment and try out different things. So was that the case for you, where you were like, okay, we tried this, doesn't really work, we know that there's some opportunity here with meta ads, or what did you have like a decision-making process with that?
So it's funny because that's one of the things I say to people now. I didn't have that process. I just like tried things and failed, basically. So like we went into Selfridges really early on. You can imagine getting that call when your business is like 4 or 5 months old, and they were like coming to Selfridges, and with no knowledge on paper, that sounds like an incredible thing to do.
Right.
It sounds like the best thing could happen to you.
Yeah.
And it was a disaster.
Wow.
And it was a disaster because I didn't understand that retail is very much its own game, and you have to understand how to play it. So things like if you go into a retailer, you don't just put your products on the shelf. You go in and see the people on the ground, the staff on the ground every week, and you have to be reminding them about your product so they can sell your product. You have to be giving them merch so that they want to sell your product over all the other products. Like all of those things, I just didn't know that.
It's another audience
so I just
to sell
stuck
to.
my thing in Selfridges and was like, yippee. And we ended up losing like 30 grand because they just didn't treat us very well. And it was difficult, and I didn't understand.
And you overlooked what was actually involved.
Yeah,
in
and
the
they
whole
just
retail
said kept ordering more stock, and I didn't think to check like, okay, but what's the sell-through rate here? Like blah blah blah.
And just on that Selfridges note, sorry, what also pops into my mind is how much I love also, I think we're on the same page with this as well, like customer obsession versus competitor focus. And I think there's so many stories and things we want to get into, but I think social media and rubbernecking, looking over your shoulder, exacerbates that whole thing of like, oh, Selfridges have called, and more of, I guess, the vanity projects. And
Well, I think it comes down to
Quick one, this is Future Steph coming to you from beyond. If you're enjoying this episode, then you can probably guess what I want you to do. Please do me one tiny favour that costs you nothing and takes a second of your time. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps to support this show, and I'm really grateful for you listening. Let's get back into it.
Well, I think it comes down to ego over profit.
Exactly.
And that's what, at the beginning, you do choose ego because you don't know any better. And now, honestly, I can't tell you the amount of opportunities I get in my inbox all the time. We just got Decathlon saying to us, come into Decathlon. That, 3 years ago, would have made me like, right, let's fucking go. And now I'm like, hang on a second. We've got 6 things up on our board for 2025, and this is not one of them.
Wow.
So I'm going to say no to this opportunity right now. And I think you have to really be clear on your strategy, and then you have to really be disciplined about sticking to it.
Is it easier to be clear on your strategy at this point that you are in your business?
Yeah.
So going back to those early days, that 0 to 1, how do you stay strategic and stay focused?
If I did it again, which I am hoping to do shortly.
Okay. Yeah. Is this a strategy and tragedy exclusive? Scoop.
Yeah. I would run experiments in considered periods of time, and I would, assign a certain amount of cash and energy to it, and I would see, and I would run it like that. And that's how I now advise other people to do it, and how we now do it in our company. But I just didn't know any better at the beginning. Also, if you're running an e-com company, to be honest, there's a blueprint. The other thing is, I thought as a new entrepreneur that I was reinventing the wheel, and actually I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
There's enough 50, 100 million e-commerce companies who can literally tell you the blueprint. And there's, consultants in the space like a Nick Sharma and a Cody Floker who are running these big US brands. They write emails every week that tells you the playbook. You don't need to make it up. It's literally there for you free on the internet.
But I feel like, again, going back to the appeal of entrepreneurship, where, again, especially we've both had careers, we've come from employment, we're not the kind of the 16-year-old dropouts and never known any different. I think also cutting early stage entrepreneurs some slack with the excitement and the opportunity to go and jump in and just
For sure. But it's just not the smartest way to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, the other thing is you've got to stay alive.
Yeah.
So all the pennies you're wasting are significant, right? You said about, startups drowning, often they just run out of money. So that thing of just I wish I'm the tightest bitch in my business you've ever seen. I watch every single penny, and I wasn't like that at all at the start. We raised 250 grand in an angel round after we were about a year and a half old maybe. And I was like, I've never seen 250 grand in my bank.
Yeah.
I was like, that is poof. Let's go and sponsor these athletes, do this event. And then I was like, oh my God, the money's running out. But I did need to go through that. It was a baptism of fire. And now I'm like, where's the ROI on that £5 that you just spent at Tesco's? Do you know what I mean?
You grow through what you go through, don't you? It's funny you saying that 250 grand, not even seeing it on a screen in your bank account, because I think you do get past a certain amount where it's meaningless.
Now,
right?
now 250 grand is not, we wouldn't bat an eyelid.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so growth levers, different stages. So you're like, okay, beginning, kind of trying everything, learn a lot of lessons the hard way, double down on meta ads, just kind of purely focused on performance marketing. Where are you at now? What's getting you to the next stage?
Yeah, so now it's much more about balancing performance with brand and
music to my ears. That's nice to hear.
And making sure that, you know, we give an incredible experience. And we haven't always done that, to be totally truthful, because we have grown quite quickly, and as a result, like, the experience has sometimes just crumbled under the weight of the growth.
Yeah.
And like I said, because we're not VC backed, it's not like, you know, we've got 3 million quid in the bank and we can go, right, we're going to hire that fantastic head of ops, we're going to invest in that massive warehouse. Like, this stuff happens very incrementally for us. And sometimes we need to have the growth before we can make the investments.
Yeah.
So,
which isn't a bad thing, by the way. I mean, that's also a common mistake.
It's not. And I, for me, I mean, I don't know whether I should say this on a podcast because things might change, but, you know, I don't think I'm a VC type founder. I don't appreciate that journey. I want my businesses to be profitable. And I don't want to be controlled. Like, the reason I started my own companies was for freedom, you know, and that's more important to me than growing quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
So
totally preaching to the choir on that. I get asked all the time about why I didn't exit my last business. And it's like, well, essentially, my last business was a service-based company that was so intrinsically tied to me, the talent, the team, that the only exit options would have been an acqui-hire. And so on paper, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to dedicate at least 12 to 18 months to another, but like, why have I worked so hard to work myself into another job when the whole reason I did this was for the freedom and to get out of this?
I do think angels are an incredible, I don't think enough people talk about it's almost like you either bootstrap or you raise VC.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's this
so
incredible
binary
pool of like angels. We've raised only from angels, and it's incredible because they leave me alone.
Yeah, nice.
And they, you know, we have complete freedom, but they also have given us some cash to accelerate.
So
but
nice.
The point around kind of scaling up now, I think it's very much about balancing performance with brand, having a very clear identity, which is something we're really working on this year to really stand out in the market. I do think as well in e-com, you know, the customer experience is a USP. You can make that so brilliant. It is the reason that people come to you, and it's the reason that people talk about you.
Yeah.
So for us, that is the big area that we're focusing on this year. We just hired some great people who are all kind of starting at the moment to build out an incredible customer experience. And we're also very focused on, I think as well in the e-com game, you've got to stay ahead of the curve in terms of product. So I put it down to 3 things. I put it down to product, innovation, timing, and quality, brand, and, you know, love and positioning and speaking to a community, and then, you know, that kind of customer experience and operations.
Love that. It makes so much sense, like everything does in hindsight, right? And I think from my perspective, each stage of your growth journeys here, the right thing happened at the right time, I think, because I also, as much as it's music to my ears to hear you talk about prioritizing brand, that's very much my background, my world, which I absolutely love. There's a time and a place for it. Yeah. And I think that timing that is also, I think, a really underrated entrepreneur skill, because too early, you said before, you know, startups can also just run out of money. It can be very expensive if you're not tracking the ROI and everything else. Too late, and you potentially miss the boat to other competitors coming in. So
I actually think that's such an important point.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting here talking about brand only because I have a multi-million company.
Exactly.
And the thing that I went out to the US last year to New York, and I spent time with Obvi. They are a female supplement company in the US, and they grew from 0 to $80 million of revenue in like 6 years, bootstrapped, non-VC backed. 3 guys, ironically, very, very smart. One of them is operationally excellent, one of them is marketing excellent, and one of them is like brand product excellence. It's an incredible team they've put together to start the business. And they run this thing where all the best e-com founders in the US come together. And in the evening, I went to that. And I was having this debate with them about brand versus performance marketing. And they said, watch this. And they asked every single CEO founder who came in the door, what is your number 1 marketing channel? And 20 out of 20 people said Meta.
Not surprised.
And it's like, it's almost as if it's like a dirty word to say that you're scaling your brand with performance marketing. But I'm telling you now, there is not a single brand that is getting from 0 to 1 or 0 to 10 without heavy investment in performance marketing.
Yeah.
And for us, we did I'm not sure if neglect is right, but we prioritized performance marketing. And once we started to do that was when our business started to grow.
Yeah.
And although as a founder, you want to do PR and you want to be out on the ground every weekend and you want to do these things, like that is not the quickest way to scale your company. And there is a time and a place for investing in that later down the line, which is what we're reaching. But you want to be able to get in front of the biggest target group with the eyeballs as quickly as possible and to sell to them.
Yeah.
And so performance marketing is how you do that. All of our best performing ads, we made them in our garden.
Oh, nice.
Like with us in them. And they probably cost us £100 to make.
Yeah.
Like it's actually not about the best spend. It's about who can stop the feed and who can stop the scroll. And you can't do that unless you make really smart creative that competes with organic content. And the budgets have absolutely nothing to do with that. Like zero amounts to do with that. And it's like some of the brands in our space, are spending £1 million on a piece of content with Cristiano Ronaldo strapped into their product. Does zilch. Like nobody, it's not going to stop you because nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like you're not speaking to anybody. So I just don't agree. And I think, there's another way to look at that. Look, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has made some incredibly questionable statements and choices, especially in the last couple of months. But that aside, what platforms like Facebook and Shopify have enabled someone like me to start a brand at my kitchen table and turn it into a multi-million-dollar company. Like that is democratizing startups.
Yeah.
It is enabling anybody to play this game. And that is not like it was before, where in order to get your business out there, you had to get a TV ad for £500,000. Like anybody can start. Anybody can go on Instagram, start filming themselves and tell their story and get followers. It's phenomenal. It's completely democratized the process, and that's why we're seeing so many startups created, because anybody can do it. I think it's another way to look at it. Yeah.
Have you discovered any surprising tactics to stop the scroll? Like any specific little things, like with those creatives that like grab that attention?
Well, I think just like it's got to feel like you're watching it from your mate's garden, or like, it's got to feel like an authentic, organic piece of content. We've moved on from this era of shiny influencers, because if you look back 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when influencers were on the rise, we were kind of watching these polished people talk about these brands and products for the first time, and it was new, and people followed influencers. Now people follow people. They follow authentic, real, genuine people, right? Yeah. And so and it's why you see so many founder brands. It's why I spend time on LinkedIn, because like people buy people now.
Well, perfect segue into the next topic I want to talk about, which is your personal brand, which obviously you've built up an incredible personal brand, both online and offline. What's your strategy? Because I love your content, and I'm aware that it's the focus on productivity, scaling. How are you connecting that with selling ice baths?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something I do think about a lot. And for me, my personal brand has probably come quite far down the list, because I've been really deep in the weeds of the business, basically, and I never want to let the personal brand overtake what I'm actually trying to build, and I'm very conscious of that. But for me this year, as we've got a bit of a bigger team, we've got a bit more resource, it is a bigger focus. And I think the point is, if I talked about ice baths every day, no one would follow me, is the reality. So it's about a couple of things. Firstly, a lot of people follow and buy from MyoMaster because they like Joe's and Mai's lifestyle, which is we're high performance people, we're ambitious, but we do have a family and we're trying to juggle those things, which is reflective of our customer, basically. Yeah. Like our customer is typically someone who takes their wellness seriously, they work out, they often have relatively high disposable income because our products aren't cheap. So they have good jobs and they're, very motivated and passionate about those jobs. And I talk about things that is relevant to those people. And so the people that are in my audience are my customer.
That does make sense.
So every, 2 weeks when I do mention an ice bath or even share a picture of me in the ice bath, it's selling, because I've built an audience of people that are engaged. And if I every day was like, sauna, people would be like, I don't care. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So for me, it's like, it's just the brand is very aligned to who I am.
Exactly.
It's about like getting the ultimate performance. That's what we sell. We sell, wake up every day and be at your best.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. Connecting a few things here on the personal brand front. So earlier on we mentioned about minorities, female founders, women in business. You're saying about, Emma Greedy, for example, another top Black female entrepreneur, Sharmadean Reed, and she's also the author of New Methods for Women, where she writes about the cost of visibility, especially for female founders. So in this day and age with social media, her point is basically around the cost that goes into being that face, whether it's time and money that goes into being presentable and everything else. What's your take on that? As a woman in business where things are already kind of hard enough for us, to also be the face, be the brand ambassador and not get compensated for it?
I do get compensated for it because it's my company and I, decide how much I pay myself and what my bonuses look like and what the share structure is. And maybe more the point is, does it matter more for us as women that we have to look a certain way versus like if a man was doing it, people would care more about what they're saying versus how they look. And I'm super conscious of that. I think that is right. I think there is an expectation that, and it certainly is a bonus if you just be real. If you're showing up looking, I guess, more presentable, more appealing. And do I think about that? Yes, I do. Like, as in, I want to be more like vlogging my life, but like 90% of my life is like hair up in the office or the warehouse, like doing shit. Yeah. And it's like, is that appealing to people? But I think it is. I think actually when I look at the people who are really killing it, I'd say I'm like, if the base is here on personal brand, I'm like here and the real, players are up here. That people like Amy Smalley, who runs Odd Muse, she's done a phenomenal job of building her personal brand to feed her business. She just shows herself in her pajamas and like she looks like, and the reality, and I think that's what people buy into. But yeah, there's definitely an increased pressure, and there is definitely a mindset where I'm like, ooh, showing up in my pajamas, like, I'm gonna go and pitch to an investor. Do these two things speak to each other? I don't know. But I think what I've learned is authenticity is king. Yeah, exactly. Thankfully, it's going our way because it means that we can just have a hair up, be in pajamas. Yeah,
and, like, it
is a tough one. Like, for instance, you would never see Emma Greedy at looking anything other than very, very polished. Yeah. But I think back to your point about like, what is my personal brand? I think you have to make some considered decisions about how you show up. And like, we don't know the internet our entire life. Instead, let's be strategic about what we want to show and what we don't. And what are the pillars of our brand? For instance, one of the pillars for me is that I'm a mum. I don't think we see enough like successful founders who are also parents, females who are scaling businesses at the same time as having young children. I don't see many of them, probably because it's fucking difficult. But I choose that pillar. I choose to show it, and I choose not to show other things. So it's like, you can curate what ends up on.
Yeah. And on a practical level, what resources have you got to help put your personal brand out there? Are you doing it yourself?
I am. But it's a great question because this is the year that I'm going to invest. So we're hiring a second content person into the team at MyoMaster, and their whole push is going to be organic, and a lot of that will be founder storytelling. And then I'm just hiring right now a VA in South Africa who will help with like posting or scheduling, because it takes like a lot of time. Exactly. And the thing is as well, like for me, because I have a core principle, which is MyoMaster first, over my personal brand from a career perspective. If it falls to the bottom of this, that will always be the thing that goes over, the business. So I have understood that I need to put in place some better processes and structures and resource to be able to maintain it.
Yeah. But again, the right thing at the right time. Like, you're at the stage to be able to do that now. Yeah. Lottie, unsurprisingly, I'm so incredibly impressed. And what I'm picking up here is there's so much that, I totally get what you're saying. And it's so sensible and so logical, but I can't help but think there's a lot of it that is just easier said than done. And maybe that's literally just because you are built different, because you've just got such clarity on your goals, you're so focused. Is there anything else that I haven't already picked up on that's like, even going all the way back to the start with Dragon's Den, the way you described it is like, yeah, okay, I get it, I'm with you.
That's an interesting point. I hope it's not like totally unrelatable.
No, I didn't mean it like that at all. But just there's just a lot, you know, everything we talked about in terms of like focus, like where we are now with the personal brand, and I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of reading too much into it. But there's a lot where I'm like, okay, I get like logically I get it.
But you mean in terms of like application?
Yeah, I'm just
day to day.
Yeah, again, whether it's resisting the urge to not fall victim of shiny new thing syndrome, of like the ego boost of the personal brand, of we locked ourselves in a hotel room for 2 days and we prepared and we went and smashed it on Dragon's Den. It's like, I get it, I love it, and I completely believe you, of course, but it's just maybe we're all just different.
This is such an interesting
Do you know what
point.
I mean?
I don't agree. I don't agree. Maybe we're all just different. I think the important point for me to make is I'm 13 years deep into my career and I'm 4 years deep into this business. And if we'd have had this conversation 2 years ago, I probably would have cried because everything was a shit show and like I didn't understand and I didn't know. But what I guess I've really invested in is two things. Is one, self-belief, and two, understanding that, you know, nothing happens by accident. I haven't always I didn't like just wake up with this kind of like energy, and I'm not always able to be consistent about it. You know, I have days where I'm like, I get up at 5, but some days it doesn't happen and I don't wake up till my son comes in my room at 8 a.m. and the mornings and everything's, you know. Sure. But I think the point I've been, especially over the last kind of 18 months to 2 years, is I've realised as I've spent time with more successful people that like it's not an accident, that their lives are very curated, extremely curated. And I think you have to make a choice if that's the way you want to live or if it isn't. So a good example for me is I would be like putting pressure on myself to, you know, I've got kids and I'm washing and I'm cleaning and I'm da-da-da. And as soon as I started to get my salary back up again with MyoMaster, the first thing I did deliberately was I invested in people to help me with those things so that thing would be taken off my plate as an example of curating my life. Yeah. The second thing is I've learned I'm no good in the evening. Like past 5 or 6 p.m, forget about it. I'm just useless. So like that's why I get up early, because that is my time of doing really well. So for me, it's like lots of little things. I'm very deliberate about my time and my energy, and I've learned that's the only way. Yeah. It is hard to do these things. It's hard to scale businesses. It's hard to be a great mum and have a good marriage, and like it's incredibly difficult. So you have to be very purposeful. And I say this all the time. I'm like, I'm not a very good friend. I'm actually really not a very good friend at all. And as I'm getting older, I have not as many friends because that is not so important to me. Like, and I know some people will find that really weird. And if you're the person that's like, my mates, I just fucking love my mates. I love being with my mates. I love hanging out with my mates. I love texting my mates. If that's you, then you should make so much time for that in your life. But it's not me. Yeah. I hate it when people text me. I'm like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to. It doesn't fill me with joy. Do you know what I mean? But like, it's a societal pressure to be like, oh, I have loads of friends and like whatever. I don't care. I do not care.
That's really refreshing. This is actually the first time I've ever heard that. So all the different roles, all the different hats that we wear in our life, especially with you, right? Like mum, CEO, friend, all the rest of it. Are you crystal clear on the order?
That's the thing. Yeah. It's taken me a long time to get to this point. And I think that's what you're really touching on, which is like, it probably sounds nuts if this isn't your priorities. But I think the mistake most people, or a lot of people, make in life is they succumb to external expectations of what life should look like. And I did that for a long, long time. And now I understand. I've taken a lot of time to think what really makes me happy. What will, when I'm lying on my deathbed at 80, what will I be really, really proud of? And so therefore, what other things have to be sacrificed as a result of that? And for me, like, I want to build, honestly, going to work and building my brand makes me more happy than going to have dinner with my friends. That's how I'm built. That's who I am. And so I would rather do that and not have as many friends. And I'm totally made peace with that, you know? The other thing is a good example is I can work like I've described to you, which I know comes across as a bit nutty and intense. I can do that for 3 months and then I completely crash and burn. I just can't. My husband can work 365 days a year and not get worn out. I just can't do it. I'm not built that way. So every 3 months I go away, and I one thing I'll always spend money on is nice holidays. So I would rather drive a banger and go on 5-star holidays. That's my choice. Because that's going on my holidays makes me so happy. I refresh. I do nothing. I come back much better at everything else. So I don't care if you're looking at me like, hang on, she talks about having £1 million brand, but she's driving a battered old car. That's because I don't care about cars. I'm not interested. Yeah. And so for me, the whole thing is about understanding, you know, what makes you really happy and designing your life deliberately, so you can achieve those things. And that's what I've learned in the last 2 years, and that's made me I just feel so much happier now, because I'm like, this is how I roll. This is what I do.
And part of that deliberation, I imagine, is making so much more of a conscious effort to tune out the noise. And when you are on social media and you see all these other things, and again, like I was saying before about rubbernecking and looking at competitors and everything else, it's easy to fall into, like, is that what I want? And like the vision boarding and like someone else's goals and priorities.
I've been there. What
do you do to stay like intentional, to stay like, what's some of the active efforts that you make, I guess, like specifically with the self-belief? I want to come back to that as well. Like, great, you had such an awesome upbringing, and so kudos again to your parents for all that as well, but I appreciate as well, it's a constant work in progress.
It's 100%.
What practices, what do you do to help with that?
So I think the thing is, you know, we go to the gym to work on our bodies, and I really have learned from having, honestly, rock bottom self-belief. The first 2 years when I started my brand, it tore me apart. I was just losing cash. I didn't think I was good enough. I got rejected 200 times by investors telling me it was a shit idea. I just was on the floor. And so I had to learn how to create mechanisms that would help me stay focused, get rid of comparison, all of that stuff. And one of them is, like, I don't follow hardly anyone on social media.
That's good.
And if I do follow a lot of people, just because, like, they're my friends or like they're associates or whatever, and I don't want to be rude, I just mute them. So I follow them so they think I follow them, but I don't actually see any of their content. All I see when I go on Instagram is literally like motivational stuff, or like stuff about business books to read, or like it's totally curated. So like if you said to me so-and-so has bought a Ferrari, I wouldn't know because I don't see it. And then the other thing is about, like I said, the people I have in my real life. So I've got like 10 really good mates, and they're all pretty much very driven, hustling, building companies themselves, very similar value sets, etc.
How do you stay friends with such driven, busy people? Because you're all of that same mindset.
But it's easy because we're all of the same mindset. But then so no one's bothered that no one's talking to each other.
But my point is, you're all so focused and busy on building your company. How do you make time to be friends?
So we go away with each other.
Oh,
so
nice.
This is how I do it with I've got like 2 core groups of friends basically, and we will go away once or twice a year for like 4 or 5 days.
Nice.
And so it's like a very like you come, it's this amazing time, you're all together constantly, you chat, you catch up, blah blah blah, and that's it. Yeah, pretty much.
That makes sense.
Or we'll have a brunch
yeah.
But it's not like I honestly, my only texts I have in my phone, my only WhatsApps that get replied to are like from the team, like childcare thing, or like what I don't like to talk to people. I think it's a waste of time. So do that, and then like train in the mornings. Very important to me to have my time of like, I can do this, and I always tell the story about I have this American guy in my ears where I'm like, he's talking motivational things, and I'm like, I can't do it. And yeah, so I. Like I said, I'm also married to arguably the world's most positive person. Like the guy's like insanely like fucking positive and like he literally believes anything can happen.
Love that. So that combination with him and your parents and everything else.
Yeah, and then I read a lot of books that are like very about, you know, uplifting and possibility and all that.
Book recommendations beyond the typical?
I'm reading this book at the moment, which I thought was really crass, because it's called How to Get Rich. But oh my God, it is brilliant. Like, it is so good. It's by this British entrepreneur who made a shit ton of money. And it's very, very funny. Like, not like a typical business book. It's like laugh out loud funny. And like the tips in it are insane. And like the strategies. That one I loved. What else? This is probably a typical one, but probably the most influential book for me has been Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Oh, especially if you're in the thick of it and everything's going wrong. So when everything goes wrong in my business, which happens, regularly, I go back to the book because it's like such a reminder. He had to go back to work like 3 or 4 times. He had to go back because it failed, and like it took him such a long time, and it kind of reminds you that like it's not easy and this is very natural.
Yeah. Well, I love that, tying it back into the show, that's one of the missions of it. The title Strategy and Tragedy is to not put anyone off whatsoever, but to de-glamorize a bit of that shiny veneer of what entrepreneurship looks like. And you've been an incredible guest, Lottie. You've absolutely surpassed my expectations because you've been so open and down to earth with like, yeah, I've made it, this is just how I operate. But actually, as we start to peel away the layers of the onion, this is all the effort and the deliberate, intentional effort that I've put into having this multi-million-pound business. So this is a behind the scenes, which I'm grateful for you coming on and sharing with our listeners. Final traditional closing question on the show is one tragedy that's taught you an unforgettable lesson.
Oh yeah. I love this question, by the way. A big tragedy that taught me an unforgettable lesson, my parents had a really like nasty divorce when I was about 16, and my mum was left with like basically not really a penny to her name. And she didn't have any money. So she made, I guess, some choices, always put in some situations that like she didn't want to be in, but she didn't have any choice because she didn't have any money. And that has been such a driving force in my life because I watched her, at, I don't know what she was, 45 years old or something, be at rock bottom and have to make some horrible choices, essentially. And it's really made me driven because it's like, I will never allow myself to be in that situation. And I will also never, I've been with my husband for a very long time, but we still have completely separate bank accounts. No one can believe when I say that. Like, we don't even have a joint account. And it's about like, it doesn't matter who it is, I will always have financial and economic independence. And that is something I value so, so highly. And yeah,
I love that. And what I'm taking away from that is often there are these role models that we look up to, and they can, saying before about that representation and demonstrating like what is possible. But sometimes there are situations, it's like, I'm really never going to allow that. Can also be a driving force. Like, I don't want to be in that situation either.
I think like most of the successful people, what does that even mean, right? But like most of the people who would be considered conventionally successful, I've met are driven by trauma, or something, a very negative experience that has made them.
One of Harry Stebbings' LinkedIn posts is doing the rounds on the revenge that drives people. And it's like that energy
or fear. My brother's very driven, very similarly to me, and he's very like financially focused and conscious, and it's because we had lots of periods in our childhood where like we would go to the supermarket, my dad couldn't afford to pay for the shopping at the end of the till, and that like embarrassment and that fear stays with you and drives you. And I think it's true, like either it's revenge or it comes from a place of like fear, basically.
How healthy is that?
I don't know, but it kind of
works.
It's
a question to a psychologist. It works. Love that.
I mean, it kind of works. I don't know. I guess you got to use the fuel where you can find it, right?
Exactly.
If you want to.
I love that. Lottie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your very valuable time. It's been amazing. As I said before, I was obviously super excited to interview you, but this has been even better than I expected. So I'm very grateful, honestly. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And thank you so much for listening. Really hope you've enjoyed this interview with Lottie. If you have, please hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening. Takes 2 seconds, means the world, really helps us out, and hopefully see you next time.